So this show at the Lexington Art League is called Being in the Land. And that title is coming from my own experiences in landscape, where I'm not just looking at landscapes, I'm not trying to make a picture of the landscape, I am dwelling in the land. I'm letting it affect me. I'm being sensitive to weather, to light, to materials. If you think about how there's so many different materials in natural landscapes. There's water, there's rock, there's soil, there's vegetation, there's other creatures. And for me, if I'm dwelling in the land, if I'm being in the land, all these materials are talking to me, I would say. They're communicative. And this work is very much about exploring how landscapes are communicative, but that term landscape is very broad in general, so that's why I tend not to use that term. I really prefer land. I think it's more inclusive because it's including, that little squirrel over there, or the bark on that tree, or those pine needles, or the bay, or the lake. It's really inclusive, and as if the land itself is a living creature instead of sort of a picture waiting to happen. And so I really am interested in exploring landscape as a living thing. And this idea that I'm sort of chasing in this work is trying to materialize or use the work itself to address this feeling of presence. And I say that broadly, that term presence, it's not necessarily human presence, and it usually isn't. Although it could allude to, the centuries before me, the people who were on this land before me for centuries, for millennia. I'm always thinking in deep time. Deep time is a term straight out of geology. It's a reference to time on a geological scale. So I'm always, just by habit and by who I am, I'm always thinking about now, but also about 3,000 years ago. What did this place look like? What was going on? And then 30,000 years ago, and then 3 million years ago. For me, it is all happening at once. And so that's what I mean by presence. It's not just human presence right now, or that rock over there. It's sort of a confluence of time and entities and forces coming together as if it's all happening at once. My goal is not to visualize that. That is, I can't imagine trying to visualize that in one picture. It's more of courting those feelings and trying to materialize that kind of experience, that mystery. Because at the end of the day, it's so much about what we don't know versus what we know. And so for me, the works are about that mystery, and probably why they might seem mysterious to some viewers. I don't think they tell the viewer, I hope they don't tell the viewer what to think. I hope they engage the viewer on an imaginative level. And that's why I feel like they're open-ended. I'm trying to make these works more open-ended. And so conceptually speaking, that's what Being in the Land is about. It's just trying to give shape to these really transitory, immaterial feelings and sensations. And I use art to do that. I use art to make contact with history, and not just current history, but deep time. In terms of materially, and in terms of technique, I'm really interested in experimental photographic practices. And by that, I mean using digital technology and analog technology together in interesting ways, using, quote, primitive cameras or experimental cameras. So for example, the color works in this show were made with a pinhole camera. And it doesn't have a lens, it doesn't have a viewfinder, it's just a box. It's a camera obscura for those photo geeks out there. And so when you can't really see what's going on, and you're just sort of guessing, I mean, you literally don't know what's going on. And you're just guessing at the frame, you're guessing at what you're capturing, and it's exciting. It's really exciting to not know versus to always know what you're going to get. And it's sort of alchemical in the series itself. And speaking of alchemy, these are shot on film. They're shot on large format, 4x5 film. And so you have a beautiful large format color negative. And then they're scanned and I print them digitally. And that gives me a lot of opportunities to play with color because I edit them digitally. And with the pinhole camera, you get crazy color because you don't have a lens. And most lenses are coated with materials that help correct color somewhat and make it look more realistic or natural. And so with the pinhole camera without a lens, one, it's soft, so you have a soft focus, sort of soft, infinite focus. And then you have this crazy color palette that can emerge. And then, of course, in digital editing, I take liberties with that. I feel like a painter sometimes when I'm playing digitally, and that's super fun. And then the other technique is photopolymer gravure. And this is called a non-toxic printmaking process. It starts with a photographic transparency that is exposed on a light-sensitive plastic plate. And then it's exposed, washed out with water, and then you can run it through an etching press, just like you can with a traditional copper plate. It's a distant cousin to photogravure, for those folks who know those kinds of printmaking processes. And it has the quality of photogravure as well. It's very rich, it's inky, it has a body. And that's what I love about it. And maybe it's sort of a pun because you see the illusion of bodies in my work, but they're indistinct in this work. It's just the reference to human form. And so, again, the process itself is helping to give body to or give shape to something that doesn't necessarily have a body, right? Or something that's invisible or you feel that you can't see. And so to that end, I love photography in general for that reason. I feel like it allows me to see things that I can't see with, normal vision. It is a sort of super sensory technology in my view. And if you think about, how we use different kinds of cameras or lenses, think of the microscope and those kinds of technologies, they're always allowing us to sort of see beyond what we can normally see with human vision. And I really see cameras in general, whether it's a pinhole camera or a beautiful DSLR, as these technologies that are super sensory. And so the photopolymer gravures actually started with a DSLR. So I shot them digitally and then edited them and then moved into an analog practice. Whereas with the ColorWorks, I started in an analog practice and moved into a digital realm. So I love both those worlds as a photographer, and I love marrying those worlds and experimenting with those worlds and colliding those worlds. I think really interesting things can happen when you play with photographic materials that way. So this one here is called Being in the Land, Osprey Nest, Chesapeake Bay, Virginia. And it's one of the very first images I made in this project. And I just got back from Australia. I had been in the States just 6 months after being there for many years. And I had finished my doctoral project. And I was really searching for what the next step was for me with my art. And I had a pinhole camera and I had 4x5 film. And I just thought, let me just make some pinhole images. I photographed with a pinhole camera for years on and off. And I was just experimenting. And I think it's really important to art practice in general is that when you get to these points of being in between projects, you give yourself permission to sort of be experimental. At least that's how I feel about my practice. And so this image was a total experiment. This location is near Reedville, Virginia, which is where my grandmother had a cottage on the Chesapeake Bay. And so for many summers growing up, my sister, my brother, and I would go and spend large chunks of our summer with my grandmother right on the Chesapeake Bay. She passed away. The cottage got sold, and a few years later, my parents bought it back. So we now still have it, which is wonderful because there's lots of great memories there. But it's also a place that I love and that I'm accepted by and that I feel connected to. And I think one of the things about the show is really important that I haven't said is the places that I photograph are really important places. It's sort of an even split between Kentucky and Virginia. And the Chesapeake Bay is a place in Virginia that I just adore and spend a lot of time dwelling there, actually. This little osprey nest here has been there for probably 25 years. And I've spent a lot of time looking at it. I've seen osprey come and go. And then I just loved how it was protruding out of the bay itself, just sort of like a sculpture. And so it was also the wind, the light. This was like 5 p.m. on a summer day, and so the light was just yellow and beautiful. And so I was trying to capture something of that sensory experience and that mystery of this sort of osprey was just being like in the middle of the day. This is only about 3 feet of water, so I walked out there. This is really indicative of place and how important those places are. So you'll see in the show that, for example, I have other places that are important. Shenandoah National Park, which I grew up right outside of Virginia. I have images from those hikes that I go on with my dad. A family cemetery. But here in Kentucky, I also have images from the Embodied National Forest and Red River Gorge. So a lot of this is about public land as well, national forests. Red River Gorge is in the National Geological Area. So a lot of my work has to do with not overtly, I don't talk about it in my artist statement, but if you sort of look at where these images were photographed, it's very much about being in public land and the importance, I think, of having access to public land. So I think that's crucial. So this image, interestingly enough, is probably a stone's throw from where I made this image, but several years later. And this is when I started photographing for DSLR for photography with the same project, but a different technique. And this is a beautiful stand of bamboo that is right across from Cottage, Cottage, and it's right next to the bay. And I just loved the feeling of this bamboo blowing in the wind. And it was sensual and beautiful, and the bamboo sort of made a sound that was like whispers. And so that's sort of indicative or representative of what stimulates me think about photograph here. There was a connection that I sort of peruse or visualize. The one thing I haven't talked about, but I probably should, is how the heck, what are these figures that you see in this work? And while I don't want to demystify it, I like sort of sharing my production process. And whenever you see a figure, whether it's sort of hazy or more defined, this is actually me putting on sort of an emergency blanket pillowcase I made. It's 2 emergency blankets duct taped together to where it's like a pillowcase, sort of a big pillowcase. And I put it over myself and I step in front of the camera and I move around. Really, like this one I'm less interested, but most of them I move around. And these exposures, whether it's the pinhole photographs or the photopalm review, they're rather long. The pinholes could be 2 minutes long, 3 minutes long. The photopalm reviewers probably last like 15 seconds, 8 seconds. Regardless, many of these images, this one is much more still, the figure is much more still. Many of these I sort of jiggling with the emergency blanket, so it becomes a little amorphous. I don't want this to be about me. I don't want this to be about my identity necessarily. It's more about an evocation. What I want is this, the idea of the figure evoked, but what I hope might happen is that it's not just about a human figure. When I look at them, yes, it's an allusion to a figure, but it could be an alien presence for all I know. It's just presence, right? It's a body. And so that's what I hope viewers might take away. Because I think for me, the work is much more about human presence. It's much more open. But that's how I do it. It's really silly. I have a couple of production images that my father's taken, my partner's taken, where you can see me with just a regular snapshot camera with an iPhone doing crazy things, and I just find this hysterical. So I'm glad I have them, but it looks really different from actually. So that's where the story is.
Was this was taken digitally?
Yeah, so this was made with a Canon DSLR, just sort of student grade camera, like a T5 probably, just not a fancy camera at all. And so set up on a tripod, and then what I would do is I put it in continuous shoot mode, and so I get in front of the camera and I just go crazy for 10 shots, and then I look at them, do another 10 shots, another 10 shots, and some of these images I do that for an hour or more, because it's actually hard to get it to work right, or to get it to work where the form, like the shape of the body, isn't obviously human or obviously me, works just right, basically, from my perspective. And so I could have 100 images, and I will consider myself lucky with my artists. And it's fun because I get really into the process. I'm super hyper-focused on what's going on, and it's a really beautiful process. So, and this is the marriage between the digital and the analog, where I don't need a fancy camera, I don't need a $300 DSLR, because what I do with the career process, I can use one, but I'm actually degrading it, taking it from its digital state and going to this kind of state. You look at it in terms of resolutions, you're actually taking away information. But the process itself gives you something else. You're not just taking away information and disappearing. That process gives you something that a DSLR cannot, that how nice it is. It's completely different from what's.
So the works in this room are just adjacent from the works that are part of Being in the Land. This series is called Embodied Knowledge, and really many of these objects that you see on the wall, the original objects that I photographed, I have found whilst I have actually been photographing for Being in the Land. So I found them in landscapes, I found them around my house. I live right next to the Dane National Forest. I actually even had, once I started exhibiting this work locally, I had some colleagues and some students of mine actually say, here, I have this really great bone I'm going to give you to photograph. And so it's sort of a beautiful amalgam of objects coming from different places, but sharing the quality of having been once alive or being an artifact of some biological process. And so for me, that's what this series is very much about. It's almost, looking at, something in the land or in landscapes on a microscopic level. And if you see, these are basically macro shots of all these creatures. So it's very much using the camera as, again, a super sensory tool to see detail, to understand what this object really looks like. And what I really love about making this work is that it allows me time to dwell with these objects that oftentimes we would just toss away or not give a second thought to, or feel sad about for a while and then forget about it, because a lot of these are dead animals, many of them. So it allows me to sort of meditate on the lives of these creatures, or what their lives might be like. This image over here, for example, bark beetle tracks. It looks like this amazing hieroglyphic writing on this piece of wood, and it's really just we ordered firewood for the winter, and we were going through all the slab, and I happened to pick that up and just shrieked with delight because I was just amazed at its sort of kind of writing, and so it's very hieroglyphic to me, and it's almost literal, where this project is very much about how bodies are communicative. living bodies are communicative, and this is a living body. It's a piece of wood, which is a living thing. And then you have bark beetles, the larvae, eating the wood and sort of going into the wood. You can see as it starts small and gets bigger as they get bigger and they eat more. So for me, that's kind of a trace of a process, a biological process. And that's what I really am excited about with this work is the bodies of creatures that are left. These, for example, are two skinks, and these are little tiny creatures like this big. And I can't tell you how many times we find a desiccated skink or a little skink body, or I was vacuuming my parents' breakfast nook, and I looked down on the carpet, and there was a little desiccated skink. He's over there, and he was missing an arm, or I guess a leg, that would be a leg. And I just felt for this creature. There was so much empathy I felt. So this project is very much about empathy as well, how I'm thinking about the worlds of others and thinking about the lives of other creatures in this project. And I think each one does that a little bit differently, but I hope it really, the process, the photopolymer process, I hope it encourages viewers to engage with these bodies and these surfaces, and hopefully effectively these lives through the seduction of the beautiful print that can be made with this process. So this work is called Being in the Land Sky Bridge, and there's a couple of really fun things about the making of this work. One, I made this work when I was on a field trip with some of my students from Oregon State University. So I have a whole group of photo students, and we took a trip to the Red River Gorge. That's where this was photographed, and it was photographed on Sky Bridge. So those of you guys familiar with Kentucky, and especially the Gorge, you will know this place without a doubt. And as I wanted to encourage students to photograph, I also photographed on this trip, and with the help of a couple of students, was able to make this image. So I'm really proud of this image because it was done on a field trip with my photography students. But it's also indicative of my love for Eastern Kentucky and mainly the mountains, the Appalachian foothills. I'm a transplant to Kentucky. I've been here about 5 years, so I'm still learning a lot about it. But I love the geography of Kentucky. It's really beautiful. And I like talking about this because it's really celebrating the gorge area, but also its age. When we got up there and I saw this gnarly tree, I just knew I had to have a photograph of it. And this area right here is the bridge itself. And if you look really close, you can actually see graffiti from individuals from years gone by having etched their names on Sky Bridge. But it's really great that I'm able to share this here at the Lexington Art League. I'm really appreciative of Art League for rescheduling the show. It was supposed to go up in March and then COVID hit. And so I'm very thankful to the Art League for rescheduling the show and just in general being such an important community resource to celebrate artists of the area. It's just a really beautiful thing and necessary. And it's such a beautiful space. The Loudon House is just exquisite. It's as a place. So I really encourage folks to come out and see this show, but also there's other shows in the other galleries in the Loudon House, and they are really beautiful and amazing. So I think there's lots to be seen here at the Lexington Art League.